Hey, fix this. In today's video, we are going to address not default arguments in the English programming, in the English natural language. Okay, now I got it. But default arguments in Python. So how to define a function with default arguments in Python. So this is the topic of this of this video. So in say you define a function called add, and the function add returns a plus b. Okay, so it adds together two numbers, so we have to define two numbers a and b. Okay, and so for example, if we call the function print add 2 and 3, then what would be the result of this code? Yeah, exactly, it would be 5. So if you run the code, we get the result 5, because it just adds together the number. And now, so how do default arguments work? Default arguments allow you to define a function with optional arguments in Python. So when calling the function, you can set the arguments, but you don't have to. And so using default arguments is a great Pythonic way to create reusable and concise code. Why? Because it allows you to in one function to define an arbitrary number of arguments. So for example, say we set the arguments b to a default argument, so then we need to define it using this equals symbol. So we set b equals say 42. Now 42 is our default argument. So now we can either define the second argument b or not. If we don't define it, then it will just take the value 42. If we define it, then it will override the value 42 and we will use the defined argument. So for example, if we call the same function add 2 and 3, then you can guess what would be the result. It would still be 5. Okay, so because we still have, we overrode the default argument. But now we also have the option to just skip the second argument b, because b has a default argument, so we can just skip it. So if we run this function add 2, this may seem strange to you because we just add a number, so we just have a number 2, and so how can we add one number? But now we are using the default argument 42 here, and if you run the code, you get the result 44. Okay, and we can even set a as a default argument, say minus 42. Now we can still call add 2, and now let's see what happens. If we use the previous setting, we get exactly the same result. But so why is that? Because it uses positional arguments to override the arguments. So this value 2 will override the first argument, the first position a in the argument list. And you can, but now if we skip this, we can call add simply a function without an argument, and now it takes both default arguments. So it's calculate minus 42 plus 42. So the result now is 0. So it uses the default arguments. We can even call the function, say 3 times. So we can basically hierarchically call the function, and we simply pass the argument into the function. So what are we doing? So here, first let's start with the inner function call. We call it with default arguments. The result is 0, we have already seen. So with default arguments, the sum is minus 42 plus 42, so it's 0. So now we calculate add of 0. So the first positional argument a is overwritten with 0, and now we add the second default argument, which is 42. So the result of this function call is 42. And now we pass this 42 into this function. So we calculate 42, we override the default argument a, and we use the default argument b, which is also 42. So we have 42 plus 42, which is 84. So if you run this function, we get the result 84. Okay, so this is how default arguments work. So there's one thing I want to mention quickly. So say we have a default argument which is an empty list. Okay, and now we still can run. So we have again a, b, we add together a and b, but now a is an empty list. So now we can call say again we can call 2 and 2. If we call 2 and 2 plus 2, so let's again add And so B is also the empty list. Okay, now both are 4 again, yeah, because now we overwrite the default arguments. But what happens if we call, say, this list and this list, so the list of one element 2 and the list of one element 3, and now we add them together. Now it will use list concatenation, so it will concatenate lists, the list with one element 2 and the list with one element 3, which results in a list with 2 elements 2 and 3. So we concatenate 2 lists. And now the thing is, if we print again, say 3 and 3, yeah, we basically get this same result because we overwrite the default values. But now if we skip one, we get the result 3. Okay, so this is like expected. We use as default argument, we use the empty list. So we calculate argument A, which is the list with one element 3, and now we concatenate this with the empty list, which is an empty list. So we get the result 3. Okay, so this is how you can use default arguments in Python. It's very powerful because it essentially allows you to have multiple different signatures of the function. The signature is just the argument list and the names of the argument list. So you can have a function with different signatures, but just using optional arguments. So we can call the function in different ways, and therefore you don't have to redefine the function or create a function f1, function f2, which is just a slight variation of the first function, function f3, which is just a slight variation of the first 2 functions with different signature. So, but you can use it in one definition using optional arguments. So it's a very Pythonic way of using it. Okay, thanks for watching this video and see you in the next video. Bye.